Welcome back to Yang Daily. I'll be your host, Alex Cheney, bringing you all the Yang news you need to live your life right. The big day is here. What has Yang cooked up for us? Let's find out. But first, let me go through all the other news. I'm kidding. Let's get right to it. Yang revealed his big announcement, which was the launch of an organization known as the Data Dividend. This organization seeks to enlist people in a sort of data union and use that collective bargaining power to fight for data rights for all, as described in Yang's data rights policy. If you're unfamiliar, that essentially means you control how and when and who uses your data. You can decline its use, you can allow its use, you can get paid for the use of it. By signing up with Data Dividend, you join this union, there are no dues, which will advocate for legislation on data rights, act as a watchdog for data companies to make sure they comply, and eventually, I presume, negotiate with tech companies to get reimbursement for the use of our data. Not sure if that's going to involve threats of data strikes or what, or if they're just going to do that through legislation alone, but it's a ways down the road. We need enough people on board first. It may one day also be used as a data portal. Data Dividend has launched a website, written an article, and cut a video detailing the argument. What surprised me was that there are 4,000 different companies serving as middleman brokers in the data economy, with the broker industry valued at over $200 billion. These brokers collect, organize, and sell your data to other companies who want to use it for various purposes, usually advertising, but sometimes more concerning purposes, such as modifying your insurance rates, interest rates, credit score, etc. This was, of course, also discussed on Yang Speaks, where Andrew interviewed the CEO of Data Dividend, an old friend of his from law school, who was inspired by Yang's data rights policy. There's also a Data Dividend Instagram filter. I don't use the Instagram, and there was no description attached, so I can't say what it does exactly, but the link is below. Try it and give me the news. To join the movement, go to the website and sign up. What that entails is submitting your name, email, phone number, and street address, and agreeing to let DDP be your legal representative for data rights. Since it doesn't show the entire legal agreement until after you've submitted your information, I'll read a trimmed down version here for you. Quote, I, as data owner, hereby designate and appoint AMEC Incorporated, which operates the Data Dividend Project, as my authorized agent to exercise my data rights under any U.S. or state data privacy laws, including the California Consumer Privacy Act. I understand that such rights may include the right to request my data from companies and organizations, the right to request deletion of my data, and the right to opt out of the sale of my data. I understand that I am granting DDP, as my authorized agent, the power to make requests to companies and organizations concerning my data rights on my behalf. By this agreement, I understand that DDP is not my attorney, and that it may refer me to outside lawyers if deemed necessary. I also understand that I have at all times the right to seek the advice of any attorney that I choose. This agreement begins on the date of execution stated below and continues in full force and effect until and unless it is revoked by me or by the DDP. I hereby revoke any previous agreements granting permission to anyone else to act as my authorized agent when it comes to my data rights. End quote. So basically, for the moment, it's just granting them the rights to manage your data under California's law. So for now, this mostly is only relevant in California, Maine, and Nevada, where the data rights laws are in place. You can opt out of the agreement at any time through the FAQ section on the website. Hopefully, this is the start of a whole nother UBI for us. Speaking of, Bobby Johnson wrote a terrifying article detailing the Trump and Biden campaign apps and how they operate. They both function as relational organizing apps, trying to get you to reach out to people you know and convince them to vote for whichever candidate, but Trump's app apparently goes quite a lot further. It basically asks for access to every single function on your phone that can convey the slightest bit of data about you or your contacts, including tracking your location, turning it into a surveillance app as well. More concerning is that it has a news function which serves to feed daily misinformation to Trump's fan base, with no fact-checking, no outside perspectives, no stated sources, and no concern for truth or morality. It's just a constant stream of unchecked propaganda and lies, many aimed at convincing users not to trust any other news source so as to further isolate them from any facts that might conflict with the propaganda. In fact, it often does so by accusing other news sources of the exact same journalistic crimes that the app itself is far more guilty of. After seeing the bold-faced lies and conspiracy theories that Trump spins to his base on Twitter, I shudder to think what goes on in the echo chamber on steroids that is his campaign app. Remember the part of the Nazi takeover where they cut the populace off from access to facts and education so as to make them more easily manipulated? Yeah. Meanwhile, Trump, presumably preparing his cover story for losing the upcoming election, has redoubled his misinformation campaign against mail-in ballots. He's had a constant flood of lies about how unsafe mail-in ballots are, but now he's upped the ante to saying that other countries will mail in fake ballots. Needless to say, that's wrong on so many levels. There are multiple safeguards against fraudulent ballots that would prevent people in our country, much less other countries, from cheating, and nonpartisan election experts wasted no time in telling Trump as much right after his tweet. But as ever, Trump and his fans are unfazed by facts, which they simply dismiss as fake news. This is all made worse by the myth, spread by both parties, that mail-in voting makes it impossible for Republicans to win. This is likely just one more example of Trump projecting. He says the news is fake, then he lies to everyone. He says other people are crooks, then he swindles people throughout his career. He says that others are rigging the election because probably he's trying to rig the election. I've yet to hear him make any accusation that he's not guilty of himself, and psychologists will tell you no one makes this many accusations unless they're projecting. Biden's VP choice is rumored to be down to Kamala Harris and Val Demings. Harris would be an obviously poor choice, so that's probably what he'll do, but I don't know much about Val. However, I do know one thing about her because she just tweeted that she supports additional direct pandemic payments to Americans. Now, that's a far cry from a proper UBI, but it's better than Biden so far, and it means that both of his VP picks now publicly support some measure of emergency basic income. Hopefully that will rub off. The country of Wales is now leading the world in a peculiar but important role. They have appointed the First Minister of the Unborn, Sophie Howe. Ms. Howe's role in government is to ensure that political decisions are not harmful to future generations in terms of social, cultural, environmental, and economic well-being of communities. Essentially, she's a check on short-sightedness and generational selfishness. Following the devastating economic fallout from COVID, Ms. Howe has set her ideas for a green recovery, which include a 4-day work week and universal basic income. Hallelujah! This Sophie is a smart cookie. She does want to replace the existing welfare system. I'm not sure if that means everything. That would definitely be too ambitious of a move to start with. Need to introduce a small UBI for proof of concept first, one that doesn't replace welfare or only does so slightly in my opinion, then expand once people see that it works. Honestly though, an economy with both those in place would be a dream come true for me. The New York Times released an article on how the financial aid from the CARES Act has prevented millions more Americans from falling into poverty simply by giving people money. Imagine that! In a rational world, it might lead people to wonder why we don't give everyone enough money to simply eliminate poverty altogether, and then keep doing that forever. There's an idea. The National Bureau of Economic Research actually conducted a study of areas where viewership of Fox News, particularly Sean Hannity and Tucker Carlson, are high, and found that the misinformation being spread about COVID on those shows played a significant role in the significantly higher infection rates and deaths from COVID in those areas. Not a surprise to anyone, but I sure do hope that those two give it a read and really think about what they're doing with their lives. And while we're on a fake news binge, following up on the Shake Shack incident, the ongoing investigation confirms that the officers in question never even felt the slightest bit ill, that there was no way the Shack employees could have known that the shakes were for cops, and the whole thing is on tape, proving there was no poisoning of any kind. The leftover cleaning agent from the machine made the shakes taste a bit off. The cops immediately threw them out and were given a voucher for free food and drink as apology. They then told their sergeant about it, who decided to send an emergency service unit to set up a crime scene and rush the officers to the emergency room. Meanwhile, a lieutenant from the Bronx blasted out an email to the unions that 6 cops started throwing up after drinking beverages they got from Shake Shack on 200 Broadway. And then the whole thing blew up into a fake national scandal. Basically, some officers either chose to make up a fake story or were paranoid and incompetent. At this point, no surprise to me. Yang went on the Axios Recap podcast to discuss basic income stimulus, how the stimulus so far has massively blunted what would have been a huge jump in poverty, and the DDP. Finally, our very own Aarika Rhodes has officially launched her campaign website. She has a number of policies posted, including UBI, affordable housing, rent control, a public option for healthcare, electric vehicle and renewable energy incentives, fracking and oil drilling bans, more parks, a carbon tax, college debt forgiveness, smaller class sizes, vocational training, and even animal rights. She also has action links for donating and volunteering. Never too early to get ahead. Find the link below. And that'll do it for today's Yang Daily. Join the DDP, give Dimmings and Howe some encouragement on UBI, check out Aarika's website, help advocate for clear, fundamental policy goals for the protests. If you're going out to protest, wear protection, especially on your eyes, head, and throat. If you get arrested while protesting, remember not to say anything without a lawyer. Whatever you choose to do, be wise, be safe, and act with measured purpose toward real solutions. And don't forget to Yang Daily.